Outriders is an extremely fast-paced, hectic looter shooter with diverse builds and playstyles, a huge collection of interesting legendary weapons and gear to use, and a range of beautiful environments. But playing Outriders is not all sunshine and rainbows. So, should you play it in 2022? I think we should talk about that. Hello, I'm Abrax and welcome to my Should You Play for Outriders in 2022, where I'll be breaking down Outriders and equipping you with the knowledge you need to decide whether or not this is the game for you. Outriders is a third-person sci-fi looter shooter, launched in April of 2021, developed by People Can Fly and published by Square Enix. Outriders was released as a non-live service game, which is rare for the looter shooter genre these days, with the game launching with no real plans for any future content at the time, no roadmap, microtransactions, or promises to break. You purchase the game and get exactly what it says on the tin, which can feel like a relief with most games these days bombarding you with microtransactions, boosters, or delays. In Outriders, the Earth has reached a point of no return and humanity is set out to find a new planet to call home. You play as an Outrider, a scout sent to the surface of a newly found planet Enoch to look for a safe landing zone for the colonist ship, the Flores. But everything goes wrong when you discover the planet is suffering from freak energy storms. Outriders is currently available on most popular platforms, so you can find it on the Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, PlayStation 4 and 5, Stadia, and PC through Steam and the Epic Launcher. Sounds good, but what about the cost? Outriders released with a single box price, no season pass, no microtransactions, just one price for the full base game. Just like the good old days of gaming, before pay to win, before always online single player games, heck, before they tried to sell horse armor in Oblivion. Currently, there's a few versions of Outriders you can pick up. The base game, as it's always been, the base game including the World Slayer DLC, or if you already own the base game, you can just buy the upgrade for World Slayer. Now I'm going to touch on something that's been a little bit of a frustration for some players, and that's the pricing of the World Slayer DLC. Being from the UK, we usually price things in T, but for the sake of simplicity, I'll go over it in pounds and dollars. Right now, if you want to buy the base game on Steam at full price, you're talking £32.99, which is around $40. If you already own the base game of Outriders and fancy picking up the DLC, that's going to cost you the same price again, £32.99 or $40. So the DLC comes with the exact same price tag as the full base game, and this has ticked a few people off. If you don't own either and you want to pick up the full game and the DLC together, you can get a bundle at the price of £65.98, which is just over $80. If you ask me, this seems a little steep, but it depends on how happy you are to pay the price, depending on how much you enjoy the game. Personally, if you're new, I would recommend grabbing the base game and getting the upgrade later on if you enjoy the game and you just want a little more Outriders. I'm going to talk a little bit about what World Slayer includes a little later in this video, but I'm also going to have a full review of the expansion released not too long after this video. Let's talk about what is possibly the best thing about Outriders, the gameplay. Outriders is fast, fun, and chaotic, but if you're not paying attention, you can easily get overwhelmed. It almost feels like someone looked at the Division 2 and thought, this needs a little Doom. Melding together the visceral run-and-gun gameplay of games such as Doom and Gears of War, and combining it with the loot and build diversity of modern looter shooters like the Division 2 and Destiny 2. The shooting is impactful, visceral, and full of bass, making you feel powerful as you plow through hordes of enemies, encouraged to stay in the thick of the fight by healing mechanics that reward aggressive gameplay. Starting at the beginning, before you get into the true game and pick your class, you get taken through a pretty good tutorial that runs you through the basic controls and introduces you to the story and the world of Enoch. Not long after that, you get to rather brutally choose out of 4 classes, each with their own very different skills and playstyles. There's the time manipulating trickster, creating domes to slow down enemies and bullets, teleport behind enemies, and charge into the thick of it, teleporting back as if they were never there. The gadget-based technomancer, pulling weapons and tools of destruction out of thin air, healing allies, and using freeze and toxic effects against their targets. The highly flammable pyromancer, using a range of different fire-based skills, like turning enemies into bombs and staggering them with warm air. And the Devastator, who can reflect bullets, turn into rocks and throw themselves at enemies, and turn into the Thing. The classes work as a base for your character, which is complemented by what I think is some of the best loot we've seen in a looter shooter. Each piece of gear or weapon can be equipped with a range of mods. These can either have contained bonuses or build upon your class's skills. For example, on this pair of gloves I have Gun Shield, which increases my firepower by 15% when the Borrowed Time skill is active, giving me a pretty good damage boost when I use the skill. And they also have Phantom Dash, replacing my dodge roll with a phase dodge that lets me pass through enemies, and this can be pretty handy when things get a little bit chaotic. Outriders has a huge amount of mods for both weapons and armor that are simple to understand but very impactful to shaping your build and the way you want to play your character. So the gameplay is solid, the loot game is good, but what is there to do with it? Let's talk content. The base Outriders game comes with a full story campaign that takes you through a handful of different biomes, from snow-covered mountains, jungles, deserts, and so on, with boss encounters dotted along the way. Most people tend to finish the campaign in around 12 to 15 hours, which I think is a pretty good length. Now, I'll be honest, for me, this is where Outriders fell a little short. I really enjoyed the moment-to-moment gameplay, but the story felt a little forgettable. And at a few points, I actually forgot why I was doing what I was doing. There's definitely a few moments that I remember thinking, yes, this is awesome. But the further you get into the game, the less immersed I felt. I mean, it was fine, but there was nothing that really gripped me, and this kind of bummed me out because the foundation of the game is just so solid. As you're playing through the campaign, you'll also stumble across a few side activities, like short side mission storylines that flesh out the specific biomes, as well as bounties and monster hunts. A lot of the side content is actually really fun. I really enjoyed the bounties and the monster hunts. These are small encounters that really play to Outriders' strengths, by pitting you against some kind of mini-boss with a pack of mobs, often in a very confined space, forcing you into close quarters skirmishes. While you're playing through the campaign and the side activities, Outriders also has a scaling difficulty system called the World Tiers. You start at World Tier 1, and as you play the game you fill an XP bar that lets you unlock the next World Tier, all the way up to 15. As you climb the World Tiers, you increase the game's difficulty, but you also boost the chance of legendary drops, which is some of the best loot in the game. Higher the risk, the better the chance of reward. A nice thing about the World Tier system is how dynamic it is. If you want to breeze through the game no sweat, stick it on a low World Tier. If you want more of a challenge, bump it up. Or maybe you ran into that boss and needed to knock it down a few. There is no shame in that, and if you've already played the game, you know who I mean. The new players don't, but we do. Outriders isn't a live service game, but they did release it with a light endgame called Expeditions. There's currently 17 expeditions in the game. These are more difficult endgame missions with scalable difficulty. Enemies in expeditions don't drop loot as you go, but you are rewarded with a small Diablo-esque loot explosion when you complete one. The base endgame of Outriders is odd. If I had to draw a comparison, I'd have to say it kinda reminds me of Pokemon. That sounds weird, but bear with me here. Outriders has a massive amount of unique legendary weapons and armor with unique appearances and mods. And what the endgame really boils down to is completing your collection of the legendaries to help sharpen your build. A sort of gotta collect them all kind of thing. Outriders, despite not being live service, has had a couple of updates along the way, adding things like transmog, a few new expeditions, plus a few tweaks and changes like making the expedition timer optional. But by far its biggest update to date is Worldslayer, a paid DLC boasting a new story campaign, new legendaries to collect, big changes to loot, new skill trees, endgame activities, and more, but it all does come with a hefty price tag. On average, the campaign has taken players between 2 to 6 hours to complete, which is a far cry from the length of the original campaign. The new endgame content, Trials of Tarja Gatar, has you progress through areas, boss encounters, and crossroads, with the possibility of targeted loot depending on the path you choose. This new endgame activity was originally stated to be a 3-player activity, with no scaling for smaller groups. But since release, players don't seem to be having too much of a problem playing it duo or even solo. For more information on the Worldslayer DLC, I'll be releasing a full review not long after this video, so keep an eye out for that. It's hard to speak for Outriders' current play count, but no doubt the recent release of Worldslayer will have brought back a few returning players and some new ones to the game. I'm not sure what's going on with console, but looking at the Steam charts, in the last 24 hours, the peak player count was around 11,537. I want to say it'd be similar across other platforms, but to be honest, I have no idea. On PC, matchmaking times aren't currently too bad, and I often find I can get into a group pretty quick if I feel like squadding up with some randoms. We've talked about the game, the price, the content, but now it's time for the big question. Should you play Outriders in 2022? Even though it's almost the entire point of the video, I always feel a little bit awkward at this point. My goal with the Should You Play is to give you the information you need to make an informed decision about whether or not this game is for you and you think it's something you'd enjoy. Not just give you a yes or no, because at the end of the day, what you play is up to you. I'm not your dad. But if you want my honest opinion, I do think Outriders is worth your time. The gameplay is solid, the story is fine, but the loot game is so strong it's worth playing just to enjoy putting together some crazy builds and just having fun with it. I would recommend picking up the base game though, playing through that, then buying the upgrade for the DLC later if you decide you want more Outriders. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, giving it a like helps others find it, and while you're down there, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future content. As always, a big thank you to my supporters over on Patreon. I love these folks, and if you would like to join them, you can support the channel for as little as £1 a month. You'll find the link for that in the description below. Or now you can become a channel member by clicking the join button just below the thumbs up. Have a great day, and I will catch you in the next one.